want to introduce him on behalf of all of us in the curatorial department. We've just been having the best time since he arrived, and getting to work so closely with him. He studied fine art at Shorter University with an art focus on traditional painting techniques such as egg tempera and oil, as well as black and white photography. He obtained his master's and PhD at the University of Edinburgh in art history. Wow, he's such an underachiever. He got a second master's degree in Celtic studies from the University of Wales. His research areas include medieval art, alternative photography, and the power of art to create memories and inspire beliefs. In August 2018, he became Booth's first full-time curator of photography, and he says, "I'm excited to be a part of the growing photography collection at the booth and engaging with audiences about the importance of photography. Please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Samuel Gerace III." Sorry. It's just a slide. There we go. Thank you. No, we're good. We're good. I see the last page. If not, I'll get to make something up, right? Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Gerace. I am the Curator of Photography, as you just heard, here at the lovely booth. And it's a really exciting time because on April 8th, 2017, the Picture in America Gallery first opened as it currently is right now, that entire gallery space. So we've had about 2 years to play around with these exhibitions and create a growing collection that really sort of, as we say, represents American landscape, history, and culture through fine art and documentary photography. So when I was asked to give a talk about photography, the booth, and also my own interest in things along those lines, I wanted to really sort of think about those differences in both photography as a genre, the subgenres within photography, and how that all sort of comes into play in a museum sense. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight, first of all going in, is sort of like the difference between curators and collectors. So we have our fabulous etymology that's going on right now at the top, and I think that sort of really sort of encapsulates a lot about what the differences are. So for a curator, our job is to care, to attend, to ensure that the collection within the museum is as safe as it possibly can be, and that we interpret it on behalf of the public and provide that information to the public. We also assist with artists in terms of selecting exhibits and all those things. And we also work with collectors who are primarily interested in investing in art, either for personal reasons, for monetary reasons. Really, it's as unique as the individual in a lot of cases. So we work together in a lot of cases to create these exhibitions and make the museum what it is today. So the role of the museum is a bit interesting and a bit complicated, and I really don't want to go into too much of that. But we're here to try and create a narrative. Mostly when you go into an exhibition, you should be seeing a story, something that inspires you to think about how the art not only interacts with history, but also yourself, and how you play out in that. And so with that in mind, I wanted to start with the terrible question, which is, what is a photograph? We have a bunch of different definitions for photography and what a photograph is, which is why I tend to want to say something to the effect of photographic print when I'm referring to a three-dimensional, well, a two-dimensional in terms of well, it's three-dimensional, but it's a piece of paper. You're trying to see what I'm getting at, is that it actually exists in a physical form that you can touch and interact with, and that's the print. So we have a few definitions here of what a photograph actually is. that are really trying to deal with both the history of photography and also the fact that we're now moving into a digital age. We're moving into a world where something might not be printed. So with that in mind, we also can get to the aspect that photography has a deep, meaningful interaction with printing. From the very beginning, as soon as we were putting hands on walls and caves, we've been trying to create replicable images and art. And with that, with photography, because it is so scientific, is deeply related and integrated into the history of printing. And with that in mind, it becomes even more complicated when we have things like Instagram, where, again, like as I was saying, you may never see a print actually be printed, but is it still a photograph? What tangible quality is there? To even sculptural pieces like the photograph that you see in the middle, which is a series of acrylic prints that are set up so that you can sort of see the change of landscape and change of time over just a few seconds. But it really sort of pushes that aspect of, is that a sculpture, is it a photograph? And the last one is we have a motion transfer. And that again has this questioning, so that's from a Polaroid that they've then manipulated and then put on a piece of paper. And so is that a photograph, is it a print? There's a lot of questions there, which is why I think one of the best ways to think about photography in terms of what a photograph is it's using light to reproduce an image, sometimes on a two-dimensional surface, either using chemical processes or digital processes. And that sort of gets everything. So with that in mind, how do we start to navigate what we need to be doing? And again, I would look to the booth for inspiration. And when it came to this aspect of subgenres in photography, I decided to go with something that we can sort of all see the differences of by making it very specific. So we're going to look at horse riders and really sort of see how that one subject can be seen in different ways and judged in different ways that are each unique onto themselves. So with photojournalism, we have images that help tell a news story. Sometimes photo manipulation is either frowned upon or not part of that. And you can get these sort of, classic images of what you'll be seeing in a newspaper. They're there to record the information in as clear way as possible. This is a little bit different than street photography. With street photography, we have this aspect of going into seeing chance encounters with day-to-day life on the streets. And sometimes these can be completely random to a little bit more planned, but they really are there to show the culture of the street that's happening in that moment in time. And this is from an amazing series in 2014 called Southern Riders, which interestingly enough preceded Roy Doyle's Mississippi Delta Riders. So with this one's looking at cowboy culture in Louisiana. So it's a very interesting thing to see how cowboy culture isn't just confined to the West. It's truly American in a lot of cases and includes a lot of people. With documentary photography, we're looking at something that sort of blends street photography and photojournalism. This is still in the area of representational photography. So this is photography that is trying to show something in the world. It's trying to provide a piece of information, and that is its primary goal. And as we can see more and more, we're starting to get to intent. And I don't think we have to go too far in terms of intent when we get to commercial photography. So with commercial photography, it's again sort of usually derided in a lot of cases, in some cases unfairly, because the quality there is there. It's just for a different audience and a different work and a different target. So with these, we see narrative scenes, we see brand recognition and focus. Interestingly enough, our good old smoking cowboy image was a way for that cigarette company to sell filtered cigarettes, which were at the time, so the 1954, were seen as womanly. So this is a way of going, you can still smoke filtered cigarettes and be a tough cowboy. Originally it was a bunch of different other sort of hard-working male types, but then they sort of focused on the cowboy type going forward. And while this is still narrative, again, the target is different, the intent is different. A lot of times what we have with fine art is all about intent and is all about sort of goals in terms of those lines. And we see that slightly start happening when you get into fashion photography or editorial photography, which tends to either, much like commercial photography, sell you an idea, sell you a brand. The photography's there as a means to an end. It's not the goal. And while you can create wonderfully aesthetically pleasing images, and even images that can later on be used for helpful historical research, it's again trying to create something that's not really about the photograph, but about something else, something entirely different. And this puts us into this aspect of historical photography as well. These are typically older photographs. I will be very general by what I mean by older because time is linear and it keeps on going. So I'm sure today, like 100 years, someone will be talking about historical photography, about 2019. But these are important pieces of social research data. We can see how people lived, we can look at how they dressed, we can look at how they worked, and it provides a much needed form of information. And they can also be wonderful artifacts in their own rights and worthy of their own exhibitions and studies. And here again, we see this difference in how these images are working. So here we have a woman on a horse facing forward. The scene is slightly blurry, mostly due to the particular medium and process at the time. And really even then, this was just to record this incident. This wasn't staged in what we were seeing with the fashion photography. This was a photograph that was meant to record, was meant to preserve information in a clear and present way. With landscape photography, I know it's a hard one to put in a horse and still get it to consider landscape. So I know this is not a pure landscape. I admit that, I understand. But with the landscape photography, we really have to sort of change how we interact and view it, because it's no longer about the subject in a lot of cases, but you start to get into the aspect of feeling. One of the greatest things I've heard in regards to Ansel Adams and his photographs was, when you look at his pictures of Yosemite, you see how he saw Yosemite. And really that's what we're getting with landscape photography. At this point, we've talked about a lot of the other genres and how they view into certain things. Now we're starting to see that sort of artistic presence coming into this piece. And with it are different judgments. In this case, is this a landscape because it has a figure in it? Okay, probably not. But I think it shows how we can appreciate it because it's giving us a type of feeling when we look at it. There's the water, there's the open sky, there's this image of vastness, and you can't help but sort of feel similar to that. So now that we've talked about all those wonderful emotive qualities, we have scientific photography, which is primarily, you'll probably see this at natural history museums, and these will be there to show not only the importance of the history of photography and film in a lot of cases, but also they're really, again, they're back to that aspect of recording information for information's sake. And interestingly enough, while this is this image of Sally Gardner at Gallup, which is part of the whole how do horses run, do they actually lift all four of their feet off the ground? What's funny about this, actually what's interesting about this, not funny, is that this is often credited as the first sort of motion picture, but it was made by using solid wet plates cameras, and the horse triggered each camera shutter as it was running by pulling on the thread. So these are separate images of something that's going on that then becomes, through optical illusions, a motion picture by stringing them together in a particular way. But I like to think of these at that sort of razor's edge of what is film and what is photography as a subject. And I couldn't help but, throw in some sports photography as well, especially after that. And this is the Volk's series on the Indian relay riders, which is a American Indian form of the rodeo, essentially. And is often characterized by bareback riding. They have their own specific tests and games and the like. But it's usually considered very energetic and very extreme in a lot of cases when it comes to rodeo type engagements. And with this one, we see photography's ability to capture a fleeting moment, to preserve that moment. And so here, the intent is to try and focus on how can we slow time down to see something that we normally couldn't. And that's that aspect that we're getting in terms of sports photography, is you're trying to slow things so that you might catch something that you wouldn't otherwise see, which is a bit different when we start to go into probably one of the more open forms of genres, which is digital photography. And with digital photography, I'm not talking about the medium. I'm not talking about using digital cameras and pigment prints and things like that. I'm talking about the actual photo manipulation of a piece. So as a genre, these can either hide the fact that they photo manipulated something, or they can sort of embrace it and almost go into a painterly direction. And with this one, you're not necessarily looking for realism in a certain case. The horse and the rider are sort of floating in the background, but that's the thing that gives it its eerie sort of quality. It makes it seem a bit, strange and unusual and interesting, and also emotive, which is where we get to this aspect of what is fine art photography. And there's one definition that I like, and it's what we've sort of seen as we've gone through these, which is simply capturing what one sees in an artistic way through the art of photography is not creating fine art. Like, it's creating a great picture. I think Ansel Adams, again, had one of those lines where it was, that's a great record of something that exists, when it came to a really aesthetically pleasing photograph. But the goal of fine art photography is to express an idea, a message, or emotion. And so this is Antonio Gomez's one of his photographs from the Charo series, where he goes to Mexico and connects with the Charo's culture of his past, but also his present, and has these stunningly black and white digital photographs of these encounters. And we can see how it goes and can sort of slot into various of the other subgenres that we were just talking about. But the intent is the thing that differs. He's going there to create a narrative, to connect emotionally, to see what he can make with photography. Now, interestingly enough, as we move on to the sort of second part of this, thinking of all those wonderful genres, is that with the advent of digital photography, a lot of people are now turning to the photography of the past. And by the photography of the past, what I mean is alternative photography, which sounds really exciting and very weird, but it's actually sort of a mix of experimentations and just old, earlier forms of photography that were popular in the 1800s. So these tend to refer to non-commercial, non-traditional photographic printing processes. And so, but what we mean by that is silver gelatin black and white is your typical run-of-the-mill, what we would consider the basic form of black and white photography. And so anything that deviates from that can be considered alternative. And the same with digital. And what we mean by that when we talk about these are some of these fabulous old forms of printing. So if we have the daguerreotype print, this was originally created in 1839. And essentially what it is it's an image that's been etched on to silver-coated copper through mercury and iodine. And so what it creates is these really interesting, almost mirror-like surfaces that you have to tilt to see either positively or negatively. And what I wanted to do when I started talking about alternative photography is also show how it keys into Western art and Western contemporary art. So we have Bina Dina. He's a Vietnamese-born American artist. He was born in 1977. He immigrated with his parents to the USA in 1979. And he actually went out west as part of his, after getting his master's in art, and spent 6 years capturing the different landscapes. And what's so interesting about these daguerreotypes is that they're small, and in a lot of cases, because they are an old process of photography, they link into that aspect of the earliest photographers being sent by the US government to record these places of natural wonder. And so it sort of gives this piece a timeless, almost eerie quality, because it's created in such a way that is old or different. It sort of triggers those things. And that's what you have with the daguerreotypes really sort of, again, slotting into contemporary Western American art as well. Following that, interestingly enough, is another photographic process, the ambrotype from 1851. These were originally created by Frederick Scott Archer and Gustave Gray, and they were actually a way to make photography faster and cheaper. With the daguerreotype, that was the first commercial form of photography, the first public form of photography that was possible, and people went and got their photos taken. There was early experimentation with color that were more or less unsuccessful. And the ambrotype was created to meet the needs of the people. And what it is it's essentially just a piece of glass that has a collodion on it, which is a cellulose-based material, and then a photosensitive compound such as silver nitrate. And so you put this, you put it in the camera, and it would develop in about 15 minutes. So it was a very, very quick process in regards to daguerreotypes. And what we have here, again, feeling the aspect of how these things can be seen in new and interesting in different ways, is by Matthias Omeleta, who is from Marseille, France. And he moved out to the West and was interested in Mexican and American culture out West, and wrote these series of letters to family members, and also was able to get letters from other people. And so what he did is he combined a lot of different techniques. And so what we have here is we have the ambrotype, so we have that image on a piece of glass. But it's also carefully written handwriting in gold leaf that encapsulates it. So the photograph becomes a bit different. And I think is a very interesting thing to think about in terms of where are the limits of photography today and how you can do different things. Tintypes came a bit afterwards. These came out in 1853 to 1856. And what's fun is, I should have highlighted this. Both of the images that I'm showing in these regards are by contemporary artists. One is an American artist in the most general sense, and the other one is an artist who specifically does something regarding Western art, American Western art. So these are things that are being done right now and are incredibly contemporary despite their old appearances. With tintypes, it was basically the same thing with the previous process, except they were able to use metal background. It was cheaper, faster, and when we refer to it as a lacquered background, it's enamel. It's enamel. That's the thing that allows it to be black and matte. And I like this just because it's a found object kind of a thing. It might be hard to see. Can I do that yet? Oh, no, maybe. No, it sort of blends in. Good to know. So this is David Adams. He was born in 1980, and he is originally from Arizona. And he would go out finding these cans as a kid and connected with that as an adult doing photography. So it's kind of hard to see, but the top can, the topmost can actually has a little photographic scene printed on it through the tintype. And that's a nice sort of way of talking about the land in terms of the industrial heritage of the West, but also in terms of how you're sort of seeing the landscape now. The landscape is changed and so old, but there's still this aspect of change and renewal that is going on. Another aspect of what is alternative photography is the cyanotype. This was created by Henry Fox Talbot in 1842, and what's very interesting is it's not a very long-lasting material unless it's put onto fabric. This was originally designed for blueprints, for recording notes, but the artistic merits were soon taken up, and you have these very interesting pieces where you're able to see how the movement of time is changing. And so this is a series of photographs about the western coastline. And so they're using the cyanotype to create these images. And have you ever seen the sort of sun prints that you see from like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and things like that? That's a cyanotype. That's what this is. So you're making sort of the silhouettes of objects through the light, through the sun, to create photography, which is exactly what our early definition was. It's an image created with and or by light, either on a two-dimensional surface or otherwise. The platinum print started in 1844, and this is one that I liked because I have two Western artists, so one working in California and one working in Missouri, that are coming up. And with this one, it was sort of a high-end photograph material. Platinum was expensive, and it really created this fabulous sort of muddy, warm tone, this almost brown tone, as it were. And with this, these are probably, again, one of the longest lasting and most stable forms of photography because of the chemistry. With platinum, it's very stable, but also how these are made is that light-sensitive salts are painted or sort of brushed onto a piece of paper. So there's no difference between the print, between the photograph and the actual paper. With photography in general, especially with silver chip, anytime I said gelatin or the colloidal process, the photograph actually exists above the paper, and this is a way of making it sharper and more interesting and more detailed. But we can see how there is this interest again in exploring how these sort of soft muted tones or different visions can create different forms of photography and art. So we have the photogravure as well, which is again another exciting process. And this is basically using the light and photosensitive chemicals to etch onto copper. And what this would allow is it would allow for mass printing. You would be able to have countless forms of your pieces up until the copper starts to wear off. And this is also the sort of the process that we all know and love with the Curtis's images of the West. All those were photographed. So they were originally photo taken, so you have this negative, but then they were subject to a specific chemical process that allowed them to be etched onto copper plates and thus formed and thus be printed. And this is one that I think is great because it really sort of narrows in on the fact that photography and printing are sort of go hand in hand in both in terms of technology and also in terms of direction. So interestingly enough, with oil printing, we have this aspect of early color. Before 1930, before the advent of color photography film, this was the way that we were able to create images that had a bit of more painterly-like quality. And oil prints is no misnomer. What it would do is it used a form where the paper itself, or the gelatin layer itself, was hardened and then soaked so that it would then become sort of porous and like a sponge. And then they would roll on paint in layers to try and get an image to form. What's really characteristic about these prints is that they sort of, again, have a painterly-like quality. They tend to be softer than the photographs and even the palladium pieces because they are literally paint on a picture. I think that's again one of those interesting aspects of photography because it's still made through light, but it's still almost multimedia in a lot of cases because you're using a variety of materials. And nearing the end, I just wanted to throw this one in, which is this is a Chlorophyll Process that was created by the same artist that I showed you that did the daguerreotypes. And what he did was he put a negative on a leaf and used just sun bleaching to create these images. And in this series, he explores Vietnam and the sort of the qualities and sort of the delicate issue in a lot of cases by putting it on a leaf. And what's interesting about this is he realized that these wouldn't actually last forever. These are not things that can stand the test of time. It's a literal leaf. There's not much you can do to preserve it. However, there are two ways. One is to make a resin block. So this one was actually put into resin, which helps to secure, it helps to protect the piece, and thus it can retain some of that green color for longer. Or, which is again that interesting aspect, especially with alternative processes, is then taking a digital picture of it. So it's almost like this is a piece of ephemeral art that this is only going to last a few moments. So in order to preserve it, we're actually going to take another photo. So it's almost sort of a photo within a photo at this pace. And that's just to say, and ending with the chlorophyll process, is that there's a ton of different types of photography out there. There are tons of different types of photographic processes. And these are just some of these aspects. You have red scale, which sounds really interesting, but it's shooting color film backwards. So you're purposely putting it in the film backwards, recalibrating what time you have to expose it as, and it creates this cool sort of red tone that goes throughout the piece and gives it a sort of otherworldly tone. Then there's even capanol, which sounds weird, and it is weird because it was created through or was initially conceived as a science experiment for a class in 1955. Dr. Scott Williams basically wanted to show his students how you could change pH and how that might affect film. And we're able to, using phenol, sodium carbonate, vitamin E, we're able to sort of balance chemistry enough and use acid from coffee beans or tea to kickstart the reaction. And so a bunch of different formulas came around, but it's sort of interesting thinking of photographs developed through coffee or tea. And it imparts a specific image to it as well. They tend to be a bit grainier, no pun intended, I swear, and that they're softer images, and they again sort of have that color of being tea stained or coffee stained because they literally are. And I've included the last one over here on the far right, mostly because I wanted to show what a photographic emulsion looks like. So that's a Polaroid clip that you're seeing right there. So they've taken a picture of the Polaroid, cut it open, and let it soak in a hot bath. What that does is it allows the emulsion layer to lift, and then they can take that emulsion layer and put it on a piece of paper. And they can crackle it and give it some interesting tones and shapes and things along those lines. But when I talk about photographic emulsions, that's what I'm talking about. It is literally a thin layer that rests above a piece of support, whether that support is plastic, whether that support is paper, that is the other. Which is different from the palladium that I was just discussing earlier, which couldn't do that because it doesn't have an emulsion layer. And so it's a thing that allows people to, again, play with and see how photography might be different. And I know I just talked a lot about sort of physical processes and alternative processes, but I would be remiss if I did not mention that you're now looking at the most expensive photograph in the world. This is a picture of the Rhine. It's sea print, and it's been photo manipulated. All the people have been taken out, all the buildings have been taken out. It is now just a river. And so while this river is a contemporary river, this is a river from 1999, and that much is true. But all the trappings of current history, current place, and peoples have been removed to create this almost eerie, dreamlike quality. And it's sold for, I believe, $14.2 million. And it's currently the reigning champion. And so I wanted to sort of end on that, just to make sure that I'm not discounting the fact that digital photography is creating new and interesting and different things. And I think it's exciting because what we have is technology and photography. There's no other art form that relies on technology the same way photography does. And with that, we sort of have this looking of preparing for the future. So our job, at least my job as a curator, is to make sure that these things are safe, preserved, and are well attended and well discussed. And so I hope that you learned a little bit about the different genres. I hope that you learned a little bit about the different photographic processes, and that you can understand when you go into a museum, you should be looking for stories and finding a way to slot your own story into those as well. Thank you. I'll let you.
All right,
turn it on. Yeah, I didn't turn it on.
Going to, it just takes a little time to catch up. So I'm Jim Dunham, and Sam, thank you very much. Would you take a few questions?
Yes, of course.
I'm going to repeat them because we're filming, and the camera that's filming can't pick up your voices very well, so we'll repeat the question. But who has a question for Sam? Did he scare you? Yes. Do most photographers today do their own developing work?
Yes and no. You're starting to get into this aspect of sometimes even digital photographers won't be the ones that print their own stuff. And that actually what you'll see is a lot more partnership these days, where you'll have a photographer and a printer working together to create the final print. Bob Colbrenner has used them before. Jay Dussard, if you were here for the Jay Dussard show, a lot of his larger pieces, he worked with a printer and another fellow photographer to help realize those things, both in terms of his own physical ability, but also in terms of, again, that technology, and especially as technology progresses and becomes more and more specialized and advanced, you sort of almost need more heads to bounce things off of, you know.
Yes, Lynn.
Wouldn't you say that the digital darkroom would answer her question, that photographers are developing their own?
Does the digital darkroom answer the question about developing
No,
it?
actually, no. I like that sort of distinction, because it is true, because you asked about developing, not printing. And in that case, yes, people are developing in the digital darkroom, because it's essentially the same. You're able to speed up the process through the digital sensors that capture the light and things along those lines. But that's not the printing of it. The printing is a separate process. And so actually, yeah, with digital photography, as long as they're at least putting it into Photoshop or a digital editing software and looking at it and seeing if that's what they want and then tweaking those things there and then, that's development. That's just like the chemical development that I was talking about earlier.
You're manipulating it after the fact of taking it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you think that developing, taking pictures with a real camera?
Yeah,
Okay.
old fashioned. Yeah.
Do they still even make those kind of cameras?
The question is, do they still make film cameras that take it the old style?
Old style is harder to define, but I will say this, that with photography, because a lot of things are proprietary, they're made by companies, and those companies don't want us knowing what those things are, that what happens is sometimes companies go away, and we've lost entire forms of paper printing with photography. The photochrome is no longer extant, and it is a very vibrant way and probably one of the best ways to print color photography, but it is no more. So the only way that it's still being done is through artists who just bought a lot. Interestingly enough, one of those artists is Robert Glenn Ketchum, and he will be having a show here next March. So you'll be able to see some of those no longer possibly to get printing papers. And in terms of the cameras, you can buy antique and you can sort of recreate them. But it depends on what you mean by old, because you can buy large and medium format cameras, so you can buy those big accordion things, and you can make those big accordion things. But some of those earlier cameras that required specific film, from like Kodak or something along those lines, those are sort of locked in and gone.
Anybody else? One of my board members, I'm president of the Wild West History Association. One of my board members bought a photograph a tintype.
Yeah.
And it's about this wide and about that high. And he paid $2,300,000 for it. Because it's the only picture of Billy the Kid in existence. And so, since it's this big and that big, and it's $2 million, I wonder if it, size-wise, is as expensive as the one that you pointed out. So it'd be interesting to see.
What's funny is, I think that's such an interesting perspective, because tintypes were the sort of Polaroids of their day. You would go to the fair, you would go to a carnival, and someone would have a tintype stand, and you'd get your tintype in like a few minutes, like 5 at most. And they were sort of spotted as these cheap sort of throwaway types of photographs.
Yeah, he cut them up. They were cut up, and he gave one to his best friend, and one of them was sent to the book about Billy the Kid, and only one is left. Yeah.
Exactly. They're enameled on metal, but there's still iron underneath that. So if that starts to get chipped or something on that, you're gonna run the risk of erosion. And on top of it, what I really liked is you talking about sort of the size aspect.
Yeah.
One of the things that is really enjoyable is, again, not to mention it, but is very important to photography for a reason. Some of Ansel Adams' earlier prints of Moonlight Hernandez are more expensive, or rather are worth more to collectors because there were fewer of them. However, interestingly enough, as Ansel Adams grew as a photographer, like we all hope we are in any of our fields, studying or hobbies, he got better. And so he preferred his later prints, but there were more of them. And so you're getting into this issue of how many exist, and then the quality question comes into play. And so there's a lot of value, both personal value, but also cultural value that gets weighed in on how expensive the piece can be.
Very interesting. Anybody else? Yes, one more from Lynn.
Well, before you close, I hope you mentioned that those interested in photography would like to be a part of our photography guild.
By all means. In fact, we have one of the finest photography guilds in the world. I'll tell you what, because of what we've been started doing with Ansel Adams and in the future, the photography guild here at the Booth Western Art Museum has taken off and with John and Lynn doing the leadership on that. How many members have we got now?
180.
180 photographers, and I'll tell you what, the level of quality is superb. It is really excellent. So if you're a photographer, even an amateur photographer, you're interested in the subject matter, don't leave the building without talking to the desk or talking to John or Lynn about becoming a member.
Is there anyone here who does darkroom work?
And, over here. All right. Thank you, Sam. Give Sam a nice round of applause. We appreciate it. Support our exhibit.